Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jim Kleiber Show. Today is Monday, October 19th, and coming live to you at 4 p.m. today, testing the schedule a little bit, seeing if the 4 p.m. hour works better than the 1 p.m. hour, works better than the 9 p.m. hour. Really just playing with it to see what works best for me in my daytime schedule, but also what may work best for you and for guests. So, well, there's a weekend, as weekends happen, and I think over the last week or so, I've really disconnected from the news. Maybe it's the news is just not as uh, violent as it was before. It's not as in my face, but perhaps it is, and I'm just not paying attention to it. I stumbled on something earlier today, and I haven't had the time to read it fully, but it's something I would like to read. It's an academic article. Let's see if I'm going to cut over to it so I can look at it directly. It's an academic article that just came out, and it's about mistrust and misinformation. And it says two-component socio-epistemic model of belief in conspiracy theories. As is common with academic papers, it has a very long and somewhat hefty title. But I think what it's talking about is trying to dig deeper into why people believe in conspiracy theories and understand what causes us to believe in them and what effects it has. So I think one of the things it talks about, it says that, within this model, epistemic mistrust is the core component underlying conspiracist ideation that manifests as the rejection of authoritative information, focuses the specificity of conspiracy theory beliefs, and can sometimes be understood as a sociocultural response to breaches of trust, inequities of power, and existing racial prejudices. Once voices of authority are negated due to mistrust, the resulting epistemic vacuum can send individuals down, quote unquote, down the rabbit hole, looking for answers where they are vulnerable to the biased processing of information and misinformation with an increasingly post-truth world. So this paper, which I'll link in the show notes, talks about what happens when we lose our trust in epistemic. I think epistemic means kind of in the understanding of the world. So when we lose trust, especially in figures of authority, and we're not sure why things are happening or what's happening, we start digging deeper into it, and it can lead us down a rabbit hole of many things that aren't true. And I'm really curious about this article because it talks about how we start to lose trust. It digs a little more into what are the impacts of when we don't trust authorities. And by authority, it can be our parents, but it could also be the government. It can be media outlets. It can be academics. It can be doctors. It can be even master electricians. It could be people who are quote unquote experts in a certain field, and we no longer trust their expertise, which can leave us swimming in a huge amount of uncertainty. And so for me, when I look at what's going on in the US, but around the world as well, and I see a lot of people believing in conspiracy theories, which I find ludicrous, I'm wondering who they no longer trust and why they no longer trust these people. So, for example, when I look at a lot of people who have said that coronavirus is a hoax, what they often say is that the mainstream media is lying to you. I'm thinking, why do they distrust the mainstream media so much? I mean, I know the mainstream media, whoever the mainstream media is, I know that they make mistakes. I know that sometimes they overlook things, but I don't have the belief that they're lying to me intentionally and trying to hide things intentionally from me so much. But I've met quite a few people who strongly believe this, and I'm just wondering why. What happened? What happened to break that trust? Was the trust never there? And is it breaking trust with the media itself, or is it breaking trust with a different type of authority figure or a different expert figure that therefore just bleeds over into their trust, or rather distrust or mistrust for these figures? And it's something I've pondered a lot over the last 4 years as Trump's been president, and there's been a lot of anger towards journalists and media officials, but also towards people who have been career government workers, calling them, "Oh, drain the swamp," like in politicians. This anger, but also underlying mistrust of what these people are saying. And I've tried to understand, where is it coming from? Why don't people trust these people? And I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I think it's a question I want to keep asking. And one thing that the article mentions, and I'm going to flip back to it, so if my eyes look like they're darting away, that's why. One thing the article mentions in the conclusion, and by article I mean actually academic paper in a new journal that's out, or maybe it's an old journal. It's an open journal, so when I link the paper, you'll be able to read it if you'd like. But it's very heavy on academic terms. It basically says, accordingly, it emphasizes that effective mitigation requires attention on the part of institutions of epistemic authority to cultivate trust, taking care not to put the cart of trust before the horse of trustworthiness. Attempting to modify belief in conspiracy theories within individuals should begin with questions that ask, who do you trust or mistrust, and why? And how do you decide what to believe? So when I think about that, I think about how I've often asked questions like this to people. When people say, "Oh, don't trust Nancy Pelosi," or "Don't trust the mainstream media, they're lying to you," and this and that, I say, do you trust Donald Trump? Do you trust Sean Hannity? And often people won't directly admit that. And it's this, and I'm starting to realize that maybe asking the question in that way is not very helpful. It's maybe more antagonistic. But it's this idea of trying to understand, who do we trust? And at the end of the day, eventually we're going to have to trust somebody. Because if something happens on the other side of the planet, say, for example, reportedly something happens in Ukraine, or reportedly something happens in China, I'm here in the US. I'm sitting here in Michigan. I have no idea what's happening over there. I have to rely on the intermediaries to be telling me the truth. And even if it's something like, oh, is an email legitimate? I don't know. I understand a lot about technology, but I don't understand how to verify the veracity of an email. Come on. So I have to trust the technology pros who know how to do that, and trust that they're telling me this is verified and true. I mean, there's so much that we have to trust in society. And I think this conspiracy, the belief in conspiracy theory, especially this paper, talks about how we can lose trust in the people that normally provide maybe the true evidence, or the ones who are experts in certain areas. And when we lose that trust in those experts, we could start swimming to try to find answers. And I think the paper even highlights that when we are in that rabbit hole, we start going down different paths that confirm more and more towards our own biases, and things that we are not aware are impacting our evaluation of the truth. You know, when I think about not paying attention to politics so much over the last couple of weeks, maybe it says in a way that I'm trusting the process more. I mean, it could say that I'm apathetic and disconnecting more, but it could also say that I'm trusting politicians to do what the politicians can do. I'm trusting the people who are experts in this to do this. This is not my sphere of influence, or at least currently it's not. And so trusting that the people who are working full-time on this and who have been for a long time and who are very intensely focused and talented in this are figuring out what to do, and they're looking out for my best interest and the best interest of the people around me. But if I don't trust them, maybe I really need to monitor and make sure that they're not screwing up all the time, and make sure that they're not hiding and cheating and being corrupt. And yeah, this element of trust and how it relates to conspiracy theories, especially the element of trusting the authority figures, the experts, to give us the honest answer, to be open with us when necessary. I think this relates to politics strongly, especially as it relates to politicians, and the conversation I had with James D'Angelo a couple weeks ago, in that we don't trust many politicians anymore. We don't trust a lot of people in Congress. I've had so many conversations with people where they're like, "Oh yeah, they're corrupt." I'm like, "What? Really? Why are they? Oh yeah, like we need to get the money out of politics because all these politicians are corrupt." And I'm like, I don't really know if they're that corrupt. And James, somebody who's researched this a lot, says that bribery is very, very uncommon. Direct bribery. There's more intimidation. There's a lot of intimidation, but bribery and people like gaining a lot by being in office, not really, at least from what he's read. And again, it comes down to trust. How much do I trust what he's read? I trust a lot in his opinion and his research. Now, the problem with trusting someone is that sometimes they can betray us. Sometimes they can lie to us. Sometimes they can hide things from us. But if we keep going down this path of not trusting other people and only trusting ourselves to try to figure out the answer, then we're going to get a lot of wrong answers. I hate to put it that way, but we're not experts in everything. And I'll admit that I have a tendency to trust myself and my judgment over the judgment of a lot of other people in certain fields. But in other fields, I have no idea. Like if I'm using an encrypted app, I trust that the app is encrypted. I don't know. I don't know how to verify encryption. Oh my gosh, that's a tough mathematical challenge. I have no idea. Same thing when I, in many ways when I go get my hair cut, when it's been a long time. But, when I go to the dentist or when I go to the doctor or when I go to many other situations in life, somebody comes out and fixes the house, or somebody a lawyer helps me with certain things. These things are so far outside my realm. I can try to understand, but it's much easier if I just trust people to help me along the way. Again, the problem is sometimes we get burned. But when we get burned, what do we do with it? Do we hold on to that betrayal and maintain that mistrust of everyone else? And if we do that, how much friction does that add to our lives? How expensive is it to mistrust everyone? It's very expensive to not trust people. Oh, goodness. The problem with trusting people, again, is that we can get burned sometimes. But do we get burned more? Do we lose more money, more time, more effort, and things like this by distrusting people? I don't really know the difference between distrust and mistrust, I'll be honest. But maybe distrust is the verb and mistrust is the noun. I don't know. But so again, asking this question when conspiracies are popping up, I think the paper mentions this, but if not, this is something I've been thinking about. A lot of times we're assuming that certain types of people fall into conspiracy beliefs, and often it's the dumb ones or the ones who aren't too smart or who aren't logical or don't have any common sense or stuff like this. But I think what the paper would argue, at least my cursory read of it, is that it's not about a trait, it's more about situations and kind of outlooks and beliefs on life and what happened to these people. There are many people who join cults who are very intelligent. There are many people who join terrorist organizations who are very intelligent. Many people who join gangs who are very intelligent. Many people who have deep conspiracy beliefs who are very intelligent. It's not about intelligence. Um, I think a lot of it is about who do we no longer trust in the authority position and the experts to be honest with us and tell us the truth. And the thing about trust, and we don't talk about trust much, the thing about trust is that inherent to trust is this element of not knowing. For me to trust you, I have to not know. Because if I know what you're doing, it's not trust, it's surveillance. It's monitoring, it's knowing, it's not trusting. And so I find it so fascinating that we don't talk about trust much here. And I don't hear many politicians talk about rebuilding trust and how to rebuild trust. A lot of rebuilding trust, I think, is about forgiveness and apology and reconciliation. Apology more than anything, like a good, genuine, sincere apology. And when I say that, I mean, I try to apologize when I feel guilty, I feel bad for something that I did that I think hurt the other person. And even if I don't think it hurt the other person, just feeling guilty for something that I did, and then I apologize. If I don't feel guilty, if I don't feel bad, if I don't feel frustrated with myself for what I did, why would I apologize? And if I apologize in that way, how sincere is it? Has anyone ever apologized to you and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry that it offended you"? Are you really sorry? Do you feel guilty for what you did? I'm sorry it offended you, or I'm sorry that you had a bad day, or I'm sorry that you understood it that way. Doesn't really sound like someone is expressing remorse for their action. At least that's how I interpret many apologies. So when I apologize, I try not to say, "Oh, I'm sorry you got upset," but to say something more like, "I feel really guilty for what I did to you, and I can't imagine how much that must have hurt. I'm sorry." Something along those lines. Maybe the problem with so many of these conspiracy theories popping up is that we haven't thought that it was because of a lack of trust, because of a breach of trust, as the paper calls it. Maybe that's, if maybe just focusing on that and being more aware of why conspiracy theories would abound would help us mitigate these situations. For example, there are many people in the US now who start believing in something called QAnon, who believe that there is a anonymous person named Q, or codenamed Q, who is posting on, I think it's 8chan or some deep web thing, platform, and is connected somehow to the national security apparatus of the US, if not is Trump himself, or blah, blah, blah. Like, just believing that this person is a very high authority figure who is going undercover to report against the authorities and say that there's this underground satanic child pedophile, eating, like, cannibalistic or sexual ring that's happening in the US. And run by, I think, many of the Democrats, they say. And so for me, instead of thinking that these people are crazy, I want to know why are these people believing this? Where did they lose trust in the authority figures, the experts, the regular experts, the media, the doctors, the politicians? Why do people say, "Oh, Trump's not a politician," and say it with pride? Well, where's the anger at politicians? Why do we distrust politicians so much? And dig more into that. I think I mentioned on the show the other day, there was one person who was on TV talking about how he now believes in the QAnon conspiracy or theory, or what. It depends if you're in it or not. I would say conspiracy, but conspiracy theory, really. And it said he had lost his job due to the pandemic right before he started believing in this. So what breach of trust did he have when he lost the job? Did he lose faith in the government to come in and bail him out because the government didn't give him enough money or support to help him move on next? Did he lose faith in his family for not supporting him and bailing him out of that situation? Did he lose trust in the media for reporting COVID-19, saying it was a huge deal, even though he didn't know anyone personally who got COVID-19. So all he knew was that all the businesses were closing, but nobody in his life was medically harmed by it. Did he lose trust in businesses and business owners for just kind of throwing him under the bus and cutting him loose, even though they probably could have kept him on longer because maybe they had enough money? Maybe it's the business owner who owns who has multiple businesses, and the businesses were doing fine, but decided this was the perfect opportunity to cut his losses. Who knows? Who did this person lose trust in, and how did that affect his spiral into believing in some of these conspiracy theories? I wish we talked about this stuff. And the problem is sometimes when I talk about I'm trying to understand why people are taking the actions they are and trying to understand more deeply about how these people are feeling, some people get very angry with me. You're defending this person. Stop defending this person. I'm like, no. You're making excuses. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm trying to understand the root cause for why these people are going in this direction. Oh, you shouldn't be excusing these people. Do you understand what they're doing is hurting so many people and they're ruining lives and they should be ashamed of themselves? And I'm like, they probably already are ashamed of themselves. And if I can understand that they're feeling that shame, perhaps I can help them work through that shame so they're not doing the same behavior over and over again. I strongly believe that many of that emotions drive behavior, emotions drive thoughts, emotions drive decisions. Now, behaviors and thoughts and decisions as well drive emotion, and we get stuck in this kind of loop. But I don't know if it's stuck. I mean, I think it's part of life. But how do we let ourselves try to imagine the emotions of other people and see why they may be feeling the way that they're feeling, so that we can understand the actions that they may take as a result of what they're feeling? I try to think about some of my friends that are going more and more into conspiracy theories, whether it's about flat earth or anti-vaccines or chemtrails in the air or QAnon or this or that, and I wonder what's happened to them in their lives that made them lose their trust in some of these expert figures or these authority figures. I have a friend who seemed big on some conspiracies, and he was in an organization when he was young, and he was applying to a big position within the organization, and people on his team sabotaged his application. So he felt really betrayed. I have another friend who, was in the military and was, seeing what was happening on the ground and then reading a different thing in the newspaper and lost trust in the news. They're not reporting what's really happening. They're only showing the glossed over version. They're not really giving you what's happening. I have friends who are in technology who get angry at newspapers and media because they don't report technology accurately. They gloss over the details or they misinterpret the details. And my friends don't think it's a misinterpretation. They think it's intentional sometimes. Oh, they hate technology. They're trying to sabotage us. It's like, whoa, wait, what? So I wonder, is it from that specific instance? Or is it that instance plus other things that have happened in that person's life that lead up to this distrust of people in expert positions telling the truth? And if we distrust these people, again, first, I think we have to recognize whether we distrust these people. And then two, how do we rebuild the trust? What steps can we take to rebuild trust in the mainstream media? Again, I'm not sure what mainstream is, but mainstream media, in academics, in doctors, in experts, in politicians, in local government, in state and national government, in global government. How do we rebuild trust and deepen trust with these organizations? Because, say, for example, like the WHO, John Oliver had a show last night talking about WHO, which stands for World Health Organization. And he talked about the budget I think the budget of the organization is a couple $1 billion, just a couple, maybe like 5 billion or 2 billion or something, quite small in terms of global for a global organization. He said the budget was the equivalent of one, I think, large hospital in the US. And the WHO has achieved the eradication of smallpox and is on the brink of eradicating polio across the globe. And it even said, like, to eradicate smallpox, they went and did 1 billion house calls in India. 1 billion. Visited something like 120 million houses multiple times, so that it was like 1 billion house calls on quite a small budget. But why have some of us lost trust in the WHO? And what happens when we lose trust in an organization like that? I mean, to be able to coordinate such a global response often requires somebody, I believe, working at the global level and having that viewpoint from the very high up, not somebody on the ground, but somebody much more up in the clouds in some ways. And when we lose confidence, when we lose trust in the organization, how do we do the things that the organization could do if we had trust in them? So, hey, I mean, I'm not blaming you or blaming me or blaming anyone for losing trust. It happens. People break our trust all the time. You know, we expect somebody to do something and they don't do it. We expect somebody to not do something and then they do it. You know, we expect them to be honest and they lie. We expect them to not cheat and then they cheat. We expect them to keep our money and then they steal it. I mean, or we expect them to always be there for us and then they leave. We expect them to protect us and then they look the other way. I mean, this happened. This is going to happen in life. I mean, losing trust and breaking trust is inevitable, I believe. It's going to happen at different times of our lives with a large variety of people. So how do we rebuild? That's where I want to focus more of my attention on. How do we come back to trusting? When somebody breaks our trust, how do we repair that trust? How do we repair that relationship? Because if we don't, then it often affects our relationship with so many other people. You know, I've been reading that a lot of, I was watching something on TV actually, and it said that this belief in QAnon is really ripping apart some families. And this happens when people join cults or join gangs or terrorist organizations. And I'm not trying to say that they're all equivalent, but I think this idea of going off and joining a small group that believes in something that most of the world doesn't, and most importantly, often reiterates the do not trust others message. I mean, most of these organizations say, don't trust others. Others are lying to you. They don't care about you. We're the only ones who care about you. When that belief is reiterated over and over again, it can really disconnect so many lives. It's like you're with us or you're against us. And there are so many people against us. You're the only people that, we're the only people that care about you. Well, then that means what? My family doesn't care about me and my friends don't care about me and they're all lying to me. They're all in on it. So I believe trust is a really important thing. I believe that these conspiracy theories fill the gap when we no longer trust authority figures and no longer trust those who are supposed to give us the truth, the experts in a variety of fields. And so for me, again, what I want to emphasize to you is let's focus on rebuilding the trust, getting back to trusting each other. Because if we can do that, we can build a very strong nation and a very strong global society. I think we can do it. We've been doing it for many years, because if we didn't, we wouldn't still survive. I think we're much better at this than we think we are. I think it's quite innate for us to learn how to apologize and forgive and to reconcile with each other. Because if not, we'd all be on this downward spiral, and society would fall apart. But just to remind you that we do this well, we trust each other a lot more than we think we do, and trust is essential for cooperation and for human connection. So thanks, y'all. Hope you had a good one. I like the 4 o'clock time. Works pretty well so far. So we'll see how it goes for the rest of the week. Take care, y'all.